The University Grants Commission recent regulation for 2026 have sparked nationwide discussion within academic and student circles. The regulation titled Promotion of Equity in Higher Education Institutions aim to address discrimination and prompt inclusion across campuses. However, an important question remains. Is this truly a step toward inclusion, or could certain provisions unintentionally lead to new forms of exclusion? Let's decode the entire matter. So hi, namaskar, Jai Hind. This is me, Akanksha Panchal, and you are watching What's Going On.
Let's first see what the official notice says and then analyze it step by step. The title of the notice itself clearly explains its stated intent to promote the idea of equity in higher education institutions. When decoding or analyzing any official document, there's a simple process. We begin with the title, then move to the preamble and the objectives, and finally examine the remaining provisions. So let's start by understanding what the preamble says. At the beginning, the notice refers to the NEP, National Education Policy 2020, which recognizes the principle of equity and inclusion. In simple terms, this implies to fair opportunity and equal participation for every individual within the education system. The notice then states the phrase, in supersession of the UGC Regulations 2012. This means that the UGC Regulations 2012 stand repealed and are being replaced by the new UGC Regulation 2026. The UGC derives the authority to issue these regulations from the UGC Act 1956, specifically from Section 12J and Section 26(1)G, which empowered the Commission to frame such regulatory provisions. Moving to the objectives, Point 2 clearly states the intent is to eradicate discrimination on the basis of religion, race, gender, place of birth, caste, or disability. Importantly, the word particularly has been used here. This indicates special emphasis, not exclusivity. If the word had been used only, the interpretation would have been entirely different. However, by using particularly, the scope remains inclusive rather than restrictive. The notice further mentions discrimination, particularly against members of SC, ST, OBC, EWS, and persons with disabilities, and aims to promote full equity and inclusion among stakeholders. The term stakeholders is formally defined in Point 3, Section Q of the notice. It includes students, faculty members, staff, members of the managing committee, and heads. This definition makes it clear that stakeholders belonging to any category are equally accountable. A stakeholder may be either a victim or a perpetrator, irrespective of their social category or identity. Therefore, based strictly on the wording of the notice, it does not explicitly or implicitly suggest that discrimination against any particular group, including the general category, is acceptable or justified. From my side, there's a small suggestion that the objectives could have explicitly stated that discrimination against any students, irrespective of the background of the person committing such act, shall appropriately attract consequences, as anyone could be a victim and no one should ever be protected or benefited just because they belong to a particular community. Moving ahead, Section 3 lists key definitions. As an aggrieved person is defined as an individual who has a complaint related to unfair treatment, irrespective of his or her identity, will be called as an aggrieved person. But however, the definition of caste-based discrimination in Section 3.c introduces a new level of ambiguity. The definition given is limited to discrimination only against certain specific social groups. This truly creates ambiguity because if a person from an unreserved background faces discrimination purely on the basis of caste, such treatment may fall outside this definition. I also want to clearly state that I do not support emphasizing caste identities in the present time, and also I do not prefer discussing issues through a caste lens. But discrimination remains discrimination, regardless of who the victim is. Such ambiguity in definition risks uneven interpretation and confusion in implementation. Moving further, Section 5.7 is the most problematic provision of the regulation. This clause defines the composition of the Equity Committee and mandates representation from certain specific social groups. And here, there is no explicit provision or representation from the general or unreserved category. If the person of an Equity Committee is to ensure fairness and balanced decision making, the absence of general category representation raises a very serious question about inclusivity. Equity cannot be selective representation. When one category is structured excluded from the table, the very idea of equal representation becomes questionable. One of the most important concerns and the reasons behind many protests is this. What happens if false complaints are filed with a malicious intent? The notice is detailed in many aspects, but there is no mention of safeguarding or consequences in cases of fake or malicious complaints. Talking from a legal standpoint, there are some existing laws which already addresses this issue, but the regulation lacks in doing the same, which may be used in such cases. Talking from the legal standpoint, the IPC, Indian Penal Code, includes provisions such as Section 182 for giving false information, Section 211 for filing false charges, and Section 500 related to defamation. This is sad that the notice talks about equity, but it does not clearly explain what happens if a complaint is filed with a malicious intent. Now, let's verify whether caste discrimination cases actually happen in Indian universities by looking at the data. Reports indicate that yes, caste discrimination cases have been reported in universities and colleges. The data has also shown a 118% spike in the cases over the last 5 years, with the numbers registered cases rising from 173 to 182, 182 to 186, 186 to 241, and to 378 cases respectively. Adding these figures together gives us a total of 1,160 cases over 5 years reported across 704 universities. And as we all know, each university includes multiple affiliated colleges. Now let's do a simple basic maths. If we divide 1,160 cases by 704 universities, the result is approximately 1.64 cases per university over 5 years, roughly 1 to 2 cases per university in that 5-year period. According to the same report, 1,052 out of these 1,160 cases have already been resolved, which amounts to a resolution rate of about 90.7%. This shows that the discrimination cases do exist and should be taken seriously. Most reported cases have been already addressed under existing mechanism. This naturally raises a question. If a majority of cases are already being resolved, what specific gap is the new regulation seeking to address? Now, as being a responsible citizen of this country and a student of mass communication, I have several questions regarding the UGC regulations, and I wish to ask them to the government. My first concern relates to debates and discussion in colleges and higher education institutions. In these forums, topics often include sensitive subjects such as reservation or caste-related issues. If a student, either inadvertently or while expressing their point of view, fails to satisfy or offends another participant, the other party could potentially file a case against them under these regulations. This raises a crucial and critical question. If students are effectively prevented from engaging in open debate or dialogue on such topics, how can they even develop the capacity to think critically, broaden their perspectives, and form independent, informed opinions? My second question is, reports suggest that such issues were not significant enough to require these regulations. Alternative measures like conducting seminars, awareness programs could address them effectively. Filing a formal case, however, can mentally exhaust a student, affect their well-being, and harm their social standing. It is reasonable to impose such harsh consequences when educational approaches could suffice. I believe discrimination exists in our country, but a law should never be unjust or discriminatory in itself. Can this even be called reverse casteism? Furthermore, these regulations may unintentionally compel students to self-censor their humor, sarcasm, or honest expression. Traditionally, the principle of law states you are innocent until proven guilty, but here it is you are guilty unless proven innocent. While it is important to protect students from discrimination, it is equally important to ensure that freedom of expression and fair treatment are maintained. Before concluding, it is important to clarify the present legal positioning of this case, UGC 2026 regulations. The Supreme Court has stayed the implementation of 2026 equity regulations In simple terms, the regulation exists on paper but not in practice for now. The earlier regulations 2012 continue to remain applicable, and the final outcome will depend on the court's decision.
For daily more updates, keep watching IIMT News.